Hey everybody, welcome to Watches with Dennis, and I wanted to put together a hopefully quick video to talk about a civil court case that is involving one of the Timepiece Gentlemen. After my video that tried to analyze the controversy and the nature of the reveal video that Timepiece Gentleman put out, I had a lot of comments and a lot more feedback than I really honestly expected to see on the video. And one of the things that came up in the comments, I received email about and have seen in discussions elsewhere, is about a court case that involves Anthony Ferrer, who is one of the owners of Gentleman Timepieces and one of the hosts of Timepiece Gentleman. So I finally had enough time to go and look into that case because yes, some people have been wondering what's been going on because there have been some dates and the trial's been moved, and it can get a little confusing, obviously, as many things in the legal system can. So I'm going to go ahead and try and walk through that. For those that don't want to sit through the video, the short summary is my understanding is it appears that a settlement has been reached in this case. So that's the answer. So you don't have to sit through anything else about it. I have to hedge a little bit, and that's why in the title of the video, I've put in the question, has he reached a resolution in a civil case? Because there are a few things that I'll go through in the timeline that it's not necessarily all set in stone, but I think it's pretty much done. Before I get going through the timeline of this case, let me provide a few caveats to it. So first thing is I need to open with, I am not an attorney. Nothing I say on this video should be construed as legal advice in any way. You should consult with a licensed attorney if you have any actual legal questions. Second, this litigation does not involve Gentleman Timepieces, LLC. This involves Anthony specifically, so it's not tied to the business. This was not litigation specifically against the business. Third, I'm covering this because I understand there may be an indirect connection with financial liability that might come out of a case like this and how it may impact a small business owner who, being in the watch hobby, is relevant to the topics that I cover on this channel. But that being said, I do not know that this case necessarily has any direct connection with anything involving the sale of watches. So I couldn't tell from the documentation. So just be aware of that. It might not necessarily be relevant at all. I just don't have the specifics. Let's go ahead and get going. I'm going to have up on the screen some relevant aspects of various public records. These are all documents that you may go and access and read to your heart's content. There's a lot more there than what I'm providing up on the screen, but I don't want it to be overwhelming. I have a link in the description where you can go and access a court portal to be able to pull this information up. And it also lists the case number. The case number is DC-20-11644. So let's go ahead and get started. This is a civil action between the plaintiff, who is Bailey Bell Lafredo, and I'm going to apologize for all mispronunciations, and then the defendant is Anthony Ferrer, who is known in the context of being involved with Timepiece Gentleman. I'm just going to use the first names from here on. So Bailey sued Anthony. That's how it starts. So that litigation started in August of 2020. And according to the original petition that Bailey's attorney submitted, the claim was that Anthony entered into an agreement with Bailey for clothing and related items. I don't know what type of clothing. I don't know what the related items are. Anthony was supposed to pay Bailey for those items, and Bailey claims that Bailey did all the obligations that the agreement required, such as providing the clothing, and then that Anthony ultimately failed to pay for those goods. So this is the attempt to seek relief. How much relief? I don't know. The original petition specifies monetary relief of $100,000 or less, which has to do with a threshold that involves Texas law. So it's something up to $100,000. So that happened in August. Anthony responds on November 9th of 2020, and the defense issues a general denial of the claims and also several affirmative defenses. So there were multiple reasons given why the claim by the plaintiff was invalid on Anthony's part. So that happened then. According to these records, there's a massive time gap between the order of mediation, which is December 11th, and then a motion to compel mediation, which happened not that long ago on June 30th of 2021. This motion to compel came from the plaintiffs, so Bailey's attorney filed it. And according to this write-up, it references the December 11th order to have a mediation. After that, Bailey's attorney indicates that they, as of the start of December, spent the next 5 months trying to get a mediation session scheduled to handle this case. And they note that they interpret that the defendant was not cooperative with that process. Going further, though, the motion to compel indicates that they did finally arrive at a mediation date, and that was scheduled to be on June 16th of 2021. However, the day before, so on June 15th, the attorney for Anthony contacted the attorney for Bailey and said that the defense, was unilaterally canceling the mediation session because, according to the defense, the defendant, Anthony, was going to be testifying as a witness in another case. And I think, from what I've understood, this case might have come up on some of their or at least one of their YouTube videos, if it's the one that's tying with the same timeline. Again, this was all approximately 1 month ago, so I think it fits the timeline. But as I've noted before, I didn't really watch Timepiece Gentleman's channel, so I've only seen a couple of their videos. Regardless, the attorneys for the plaintiff asked the attorney for the defense for proof that the defendant was actually testifying in another case and whether that testimony was required by subpoena. I'm assuming because they were frustrated that this whole mediation process had been drug out, and then a day before it was supposed to happen, surprise, it's time for testimony in some other trial. In that regard, the plaintiff's attorney indicates that they asked for information like what the number of the other case was, what the contact information for the attorney was involved in that case, for a copy of the subpoena with the case. And according to the plaintiff, the defense never supplied any of that information regarding this alleged other case that was supposedly going on. So, while the plaintiff was ready for the June 16th mediation session, it did not end up taking place. And so they take issue with that the defense had an alleged excuse, which they list as, quote, which appears highly questionable, end quote. And also that the last-minute announcement of the intent not to participate was a burden that should have been on the defense to get the issue resolved, as in another mediation scheduled. So, this motion asks for the court to compel mediation. While all this is going on, there's a trial date. A non-jury trial had been scheduled for this case. Now, the assumption would have been that the mediation would have either worked out and then that wouldn't need to happen, or it didn't work out and you would end up having the trial. But because the mediation had not yet occurred, on July 1st, both the plaintiff Bailey and the defendant Anthony jointly requested for a continuance of the trial. And the reason was they still needed to do the mediation. So the court did end up granting that continuance. And the way that was phrased was that the court session, which I believe was scheduled for July 6th, was going to be removed from the court's docket, and then a continuance that would not be less than 120 days. So that's where I think a lot of you who have been sort of tracking this and seeing that there was now a late December non-jury trial date. That's where that seems to come from. Was just that's when it got removed. That's where it got moved to. While this is all going on, the court also went ahead and did issue that mediation order. So mediation order comes out from the court on the 6th of July saying who the mediator is going to be, that the mediation is mandatory but non-binding. So you have to do the mediation, but you don't have to do what the mediator says. That's the idea behind it. Plus, there are certain rules regarding the privacy, confidentiality of the mediation process. So that all gets scheduled, and this time the mediation happens. So Burden Mediations is the organization that handled the mediation, and they indicated that the mediation did take place on July 8th. The mediators indicate that the results of the mediation were pending, that the mediators had produced a proposed settlement agreement, and that agreement was out to the attorneys for the plaintiff and the defendant, and that they had a deadline to respond by July 12th, and that they being the mediators, would follow up with the court in terms of what the results of that effort were. And they did do that. So on July 13th, Burden Mediations submitted an amended mediators report to the court saying that the mediation was successful, that a settlement was reached after mediation. Because as a reminder, they didn't reach a settlement when they were actually meeting and mediating. They did it afterwards based off of what the mediator provided to them. I would assume it was whatever the mediator agreed on, but it's possible that they might have negotiated something else. We don't know the details to all of that. So given all of that, the court had on July 13th issued a notice of intent to dismiss to the plaintiff and the defense, and stating that the parties have yet to provide judgment/dismissal following announcement of settlement. So here is my understanding as things currently stand. There's still a hearing scheduled for August 16th. If there's a desire to keep this case moving forward for trial, then there needs to be an appearance at the hearing, or our coordinator needs to be contacted for an extension request, and you can do that. And given that, I think that's why there is still the December 28th non-jury trial listed, is just in case. So they still got that reserved on the docket. Short of the mediator being wrong or something falling apart between the initial agreement and everything getting signed, my speculation would be that this is, though, actually all essentially said and done, that the settlement is reached. As noted in the mediation documentation, there is nothing public record about what happened in mediation. It's not going to be up on the court system site like all these other documents are. So I do not know what the results of the settlement are. It is conceivable that the settlement could specify that the decision, the agreement, has to remain classified, in which case no one would be allowed to tell you what happened with it. If that's not the case, then either Anthony or Bailey would be allowed to say what was in their settlement if they wanted to, but there's not any obligation to. It's not considered a matter of public record. It's just seen as resolved. Anyway, probably wordier than anyone wanted, but that's my walkthrough of, near as I can tell, what had happened with this case. Run it by an attorney if you want to understand better, or go to the site and look and read all of the documents in detail if you want to know any of the particular details. But I did not really see anything that I considered outside of pro forma stuff, aside from the plaintiff's motion to compel the defendant to appear for mediation and the accusations that were contained within that document. That's really the only, what I would say, quote unquote, interesting thing was, in terms of all the other documents that I looked through, which seemed pretty typical from other case files I've read in the past. But that's it for me. Thanks everyone for listening. I hope you found this helpful, if a little dry, and hopefully we'll have something more fun on the next episode. Take care, everybody.